The demise of an Irish clan. Chapter 3. King DUIBHREA. St. Kilkeary, 620 to 679 A.D., was an abbess who founded in North Munster, in the area now known as Kilkeary, a monastic house for 13 postulants, a nunnery, in about 645 A.D. This settlement in Upper Ormond appears to have been the only one established during the early Christian era in that area, later defined as in the diocese of the Bishop of Killaloe. The church was elaborately decorated, especially around the altar. The walls were painted to depict the apostles, and the single-span roof covered with split-stone slates. And for the period this represented a building of influence and authority, a dwelling that catered for a number of nuns, visiting pilgrims, and the needy, particularly women. The land close to the church was adopted as a burial ground for the local clan. The Kilkeary clan was one of the family groups who made up the MacEgans tribe, who populated central and south-west Ireland, east of the River Shannon. The aristocratic family DUIBHREA reputedly owned Kilkeary. St. Ciar, who was also of the family, founded the church. Cousins held the churches of Drommonea, DUIBHREA, and Killaloe. These religious houses were all situated close to the rich pastures that lined the east shore of the river. Other aristocratic branches of the family held smaller foundations, whilst some of the family settled in the great monastery of Birr. The O'Day, yet another branch, held the church of Lough, and claimed that Odran, its founder, was one of them. O'Lenny was a family of O'Day, and as late as 1074 the Annals record the death of Gilla Brennan O'Lachneen, superior of Latra Odreen. Ireland was provided with territorial bishops, each generally given a diocese close to the royal residence. As more nunneries and monasteries established, their incumbents became bishops, abbesses, and some great abbots. Most kings sought bishops for their own kingdoms, which gave them added power and influence, and sometimes their requests given, other times they were allocated a monk under a bishop. The bishop, who was a monk, remained under an abbot who was esteemed, and as with the king so with the church there was a difference between the north and southern parts of Ireland. The southern church favoured conformity with Rome, the nunneries and monasteries governed by many different groups, some as independent establishments. Unity was urgently needed, which took the form of a metropolitan episcopate. The first candidate was put up in 650 in the southern see of Kildare in northern Leinster. Ultimately both north and south united under Armagh, whose bishop became Ireland's senior bishopric. It had been founded by Patrick and remained the most important of all his monasteries. The Irish word for abbot is Columba, meaning heir, and therefore his is the heir of the founder, and in many instances the heir was also the same dynastic family, the same kindred, the link between the founder and the patron, Kieran, firstborn of the saints of Ireland. St. Kilkeary was a native of this district. Her father, DUIBHREA, was a minor king, descended from the line of Connors, kings of Ireland. To her father's name was sometimes added Insula, or island, and this refers to an island now called King's Island, surrounded by a branch of the Shannon called Abbey River. Lough Derg, southern side, is in the province of Ormond, where St. Kilkeary was born. Her great sanctity and many miracles attracted many holy women to share with her monastic life. The Abbess Lady Superior, had administrative power over her mother church and followed the example of her first teacher, Columba, who was not a bishop but a monk and priest. It is to her that the clan name was drawn, from an abbreviated form of Meal Kilkeary, one of the devotees of or followers of St. Ciar. The close connection between the church and the secular head was reflected in the early writings. The church didn't suppress Gaelic, but retained part of it within Latin. The monastic libraries kept these works and preserved them. Not only was this liberal attitude reflected in the church's writings, but in the Christian services. Clerics used Irish in their studies and teaching, consulting a written grammar of the Irish tongue. And whether they knew what the outcome would be is not clear, but it made secular and clerical writing universal, greater than English. The monasteries and nunneries housed the teachers of Latin. Their ringed stone walls, built on a rampart mound, gave security and isolation from the unsettled land. These cashels were every bit as defensive as the Lord's castle, a place where the whole community could shelter. This was no haphazard arrangement, but a place declaring wealth and power. The books were supplied from the continent, for there was not just normal trade between the nearest reaches of France and Spain, but religious sustenance as well. All religious houses had a scribe who attended to the matters of the day. In other times copied out books of learning so that they could be passed on. A psalter, known as the Catach, a tribute to St. Columba, was written in about the time St. Ciar was performing her good works. The Irish missionaries travelled on the continent, baptizing Germans and Austrians, building up the faithful as they went. They went on pilgrimage, seeking salvation and solitude, evangelizing pagan people, preparing a way for later monks to build on. It was not always the case that an abbot was a bishop, governed a diocese, or administered a tribe's territory. There was no such organization, for these things were interchangeable. This company of women, who formed the foundation of St. Ciar's community in Upper Ormond, was named after her, and it was here that she ruled with considerable skill, increasing the postulants, giving the foundation credence and sanctity. This was no trifling matter. To be officially recognized and canonized means that she was accepted by Rome and worthy of veneration. And this allowed St. Ciar to expect obedience, particularly in matters of the church and women, and being a daughter of the king added power and prestige. This link between king and church made it easier to assume and hold on to power, and this close association between the ruling body, either local or national, and the priesthood is a feature of early religious foundation. It was in both their interest to have this close connection, keeping power centralized, but also greatly assisted religious foundation. When the nunnery at Kilkeary was well established and capable of self-regulation, she left. Accompanied by 5 nuns, she started a new foundation in North Offaly, King's County, where she obtained a site from another nunnery from St. Fintan in Munster. It was in a place now known as Tihelly, in the parish of Durrow, formed in about the year 655 A.D., and this was close to Clonmacnoise and St. Kieran Church, and following the tidal river north from the mouth of the river Shannon, you come to a loch called Derg. Where the river enters the loch was built the settlement of Killaloe. The great river continues through the loch northwards to Clonmacnoise, a wealthy 6th century fort-like monastery built of stone before Lough, and then onwards to Carrick on Shannon. It didn't matter where St. Ciar travelled, her title was property and obedience went with her. She and the bishop, who was son of the King of Munster, jointly ruled the church. An early law tract refers to the Bishop of Cork and Emly as having an equal status equal to the King of Munster, who was overlord of the southern half of Ireland. Later, St. Ciary, canonized pre-congregational, returned to Kilkeary, where she is reputed to have died of natural causes. Nothing is known of the subsequent history of the nunnery of her burial place, and her death is recorded in the Annals of the Four Masters, January the 5th, 679. And the following stanza is from Lear's Breck in the book of MacEgans. The call of Simeon the sage to Christ of purest, a new and transitory son, gentle son, was Ciar, the daughter of DUIBHREA. It was in the middle and later part of the first millennium that proper written records were kept. The Irish Annals, Book of Kells, and the Lives of the Saints were three sources of early recorded history, written by scribes in Latin, the result of intended missionary zeal by Christian bishops and their scribes. Gildas developed Latin literature in a style and order fit for publication. His paragraphs, sentences, and words were impressions built upon the spoken word, placed together by sound and syllable. The language was from Europe, but based upon English. As Ireland was the first large country to become Christian outside the Roman Empire, scholars had to write the Irish language in Latin characters. They were compelled to write with an alphabet. Ugram notches became outdated in the 7th century, still not deciphered. Latin preserved the first written records, and this is when the K began to be used. Thereafter Latin began to be changed. English, Welsh and Irish adapted and added to, developed into a modern literature. Ciardha is the Gaelic spelling of the family name, used by scribes in about 650 AD. Later writers increasingly used Ciary with a C or K as a more identifiable written form. The written Irish language was mainly derived from Latin, and assumed closer integration in the accepted form of spelling and pronunciation of the 6th century, probably when the K was first used in some written text. In its softer anglicised form, it is natural not to make the difference so hard. What era or part of the country K rather than C used is unclear. Perhaps the use of K, as in kick or quick, in the Gaelic Q form, that happened when the Gaelic kill was a C to mean church, was replaced by the Latinized K for place names on maps, hence Kilkeary and Kilkenny. Most place names are in that form. The method of spelling might indicate who commissioned the work, when and for what purpose. The history about the right language and spelling of a family name explains what happened in Ireland that caused such disturbance and distress. The clan chiefs, Anglo-Irish aristocracy, their upstarts, the invaders, clerics and politicians may deserve censure for the chaos that marks the island's history, but the people certainly do not. The derivations of a name throughout the centuries give proof to the matter. This unity under Gaelic kings, represented by O'Neill, continued for nearly 200 years, until the Normans were invited to save the then ruling body. And from this moment Gaelic Ireland began to lose its identity and power base. This call on an outside body was to have far-reaching effects, and wasn't reversible. The O'Keary clan were a senior branch of the Senil Carbery, descended from that tribe, and populated the central southwestern areas of Ireland. An ancient Gaelic warrior kingdom speaking Gaeltacht. The chiefs of Clan O'Keary were closely related to the supreme ruler of southern Ireland. They were minor kings ruling that part of southern Ireland located just below Lough Derg in today's northern Tipperary. O'Carey rules over Carbery of Bards. He is of the tribe of Neil, of the 9 hostages. There are none but themselves there, of the clan of Niall over Leinster. The main clan lands were Silvermine Mountains and hills in the kingdom of Munster not far from Ossory. They were a senior group controlling a vast area related to O'Neill. Another branch of the O'Careys, further east, inhabited Carbery, County Kildare. This extended family grouping were also a prosperous family with many cattle. The ancient place of St. Ciar's monastic house, situated in a valley between 2 towns, Nina and Tumavara, and 2 mountains, and to the north lies the central lowlands, an area of farms, market towns, peat bogs, glens and lakes. Before intensive cultivation the land was heavily forested, and as with the growth of many settlements the nearest navigable river influenced its development. In this case it was the River Shannon, and in particular Lough Derg, 5 miles north of Nina. Its southern banks bordered Lower Ormond and Ara and Awney. The main family territory was roughly in the centre of the country and conforms to an area of hill and lowland. It was bog-free downland, rich in minerals and well drained and hedged, and this part of inland central Ireland is bordered by several clan territories and, like all such lands, continually fought over. These early Munster tribal lands were divided by cousins into east and west groups. Unfortunately, both groups suffered from several competing branches which weakened the power base. The eastern cousin centre was at Cashel, and the other the northern group of Lower Shannon. It was to this area that O'Carey was clan chief, becoming king of Thomond. He later included overlordship, suzerain, of the Osman of Waterford and Limerick, including their 2 important cities. This large area approximately conforms to today's County Tipperary. The Carey clan were a sept, a corruption of the word sect, adopted by the English settlers to describe Gaelic ruling families or clan groups. This allegiance between O'Neills and the O'Carey continued until the latter lost all their clan lands over a period of 600 years, ending at the same time as the restoration of Charles II after Cromwell's death. Edward MacLeisett, More Irish Families, in 1982, page 50, agrees that the majority of those called Carey belong to the O'Carey sept, are a senior branch of the Senil Carbery. It can be seen that whether C or K used, it refers to the same people. Kilkeary in County Tipperary today is a small parcel of land 7 miles southeast of Nina in Tumavara, Roman Catholic parish, and this is a relatively modern name forming a link with its more ancient past. The parish was an area of many hundreds of acres. Kilkeary was spelt with a K-Y in the first quarter of the first millennium, and a place of pilgrimage and substance. In all research into genealogical connections into the O'Carey clan, certain names are always cropping up, and in particular O'Meara, O'Kennedy and O'Carroll. Tumavara parish contains the district of Angnameadle, Ballymackay, Kilkeary, Temple Downey and Ballygiddon. It has 3 ancient ecclesiastical ruins, one of which was an ancient foundation for women established by St. Carey. There are also several ruined castles, some habitable, others not, being just ruins. The name of this district was written by the scholar of Abbess as the Church of Carey. It is situated in the ancient Muscratia, the Upper and Lower Ormond. In Abbess written St. Carey, daughter of King DUIBHREA, who was a clan chief. The ancient church of Kilkeary was built about 625 AD, and it 57 feet long and just over 19 feet wide. It is in ruins, having all its features destroyed, except for a few massive stones, one of several tons. It was built in semi-Cyclopean style of Lough limestone rocks, and is believed to be of the 7th and 8th centuries. In the graveyard is a monument to Major General William Parker Carroll of Ballygrenade, a descendant of the O'Carrolls of Ely. Previously, in 1702, an earlier member of the family was buried here. William Carroll was later from Lisson Hall on the far side of Neenah town, and has a very distinguished career in the Spanish army during the Napoleonic Wars. He was highly thought of in England and married an illegitimate daughter of George III. William was also a politician who petitioned for the separation of the northern and southern grand juries in the county in the 1830s. The fact that the Carrolls used the Kilkeary graveyard, the site of the nunnery, was in keeping with Gaelic tradition. The Carrolls, Kennedys and O'Meara were all inhabitants of the east side of the Shannon. In fact, they were all neighbours, originally owned by the O'Keary, and when the O'Keary were being harassed and evicted, some transferred allegiance to the security of these other local clans. Kilkeary's nearest large town is Neenah, 7 miles west, an important centre for its Anglo-Norman Association and Franciscan Friary, which the Kennedy founded in 1240, and Cromwell destroyed in 1650. It was one of the new walled towns designed in 1171. The citizens, fearing incursions from warring factions, lent a hand with the building. The town council passed a law whereby every person, including shop owners, priests and women, every person was allotted a day in the week that each had to help in building the town's walls. DUIBHREA, a pleasant small market town, lies 4 miles east, and lying astride an important crossroads. The Vikings in 795, Scandinavians called Norsemen, more than likely from Holland, pillaged and plundered coastline and river settlements around Ireland and Britain, building fortresses at Dublin, Waterford, Wexford Court and Limerick, the main towns of Ireland. And these guardians of main river inlets were kings, who were tribal chiefs or earls. In no way could they be described as rulers of large tracts of countryside. They lived in stone houses with a surrounding wall punctured by 45 gates. Circling this stronghold were a number of ditches and mounds with offset entrances. Finding Ireland particularly accommodating, the Norsemen chose the best land and settled, marrying into the population and becoming known as Ostmen. They felt at home in this pagan land, a land of tales, songs, myths and legend, and it was much like their own former homeland. Through the ages, this settlement on the river was important, and later it is called Limerick, and came to play a vital role in the development of the country. A place well known for its salmon fishing and its access up the river into the heart of the country. In Lough Derg, longboats were at anchor, close to the shore, some drawn up on the beach, others hauled up onto logs, under repair. These are the property of Viking raiders, who are frequent visitors, their coming and going accepted by the inhabitants. A number of the Vikings strike up relationships with the inhabitants, marry and have children, and they remain working the land and fishing. And this all was a convenient fraternization which ensured a safe harbour and a place where boats could be restocked and take on water. And like many immigrants to new land, they took an active part in its development, becoming more committed to its survival than to the original inhabitants, which the incoming Normans found to their cost. In the 830s, the Viking raids became even more extensive, defeating the O'Neills in battle and plundering widely. The clergy were at this point part of the nobility, and church property protected by law. Monks couldn't act as security or make bequests without his abbot's consent, for the abbot was the administrative head of the church. The Norse raids lasted until the 870s, died out, and erupted again. And 10 years later the great Norse tyrant Barith was killed, not before destroying Keenan and Dulich's oratory. The kingdom of Afael comprised the baronies Offaly in County Kildare and part of the diocese of Kildare. Their kings related to the ruling Lane dynasty. However, the southern O'Neill maintained precedence in Munster until the reign of Freedmid MacCrinnan in AD 886. In the latter part of the first millennium, the O'Neill were probably the most important family grouping, dominating both the northern and southern parts of Ireland. They were descended from now Gaelic, who themselves were from Con. The Vikings, at the Battle of Dublin in 919, killed Neil Glundub, ancestor and over-king of the O'Neill, and during the battle 5 other kings and many other nobles were killed. Glundub was related to Niall, and last of the kings of Tara, the legendary seat of the high kingship, and ejected by Brian Boru when he rose to power. In 920 a Norse settlement was enlarged at the mouth of the Shannon, which became the city of Limerick. It was the start to a flourishing trading place, the beginnings of the salmon industry, and the victualling of many Viking boats. In 937 the Limerick Vikings clashed with those of Dublin on Lough and were defeated. The Shannon was of major importance in military campaigns in all Ireland's history. The association with the Norse never diminished, and eventually they became integrated into the Irish community. The city was crisscrossed by wooden streets, houses and workshops. Matamane sacked the city in 964 after previously capturing Cashel from the Inach. All these fit to fight were killed, the others enslaved, and his brother Brian later killed him. The monastic movement established great ecclesiastical centres, and one of these was at Kildare in the early 9th century, where O'Neill appointed provincial governor by the monasteries and king of Leinster. He lived there with his brother the abbot and his sister the abbess. The heartland of Leinster was the vale of the Liffey and the valleys of the Barrow and the Slaney. At Domnack, Stickneel, generations of the same family reigned as abbots. This fact gives light how leadership of the church was passed on to succeeding generations. The Irish chieftains' allegiances fluctuated depending on what thought to be their advantage. In this, the Kilkeary clan was no different. They were frequently mentioned in the Annals of the Four Masters from 952 onwards to the death of O'Keary, Lord of Carbery. Again in 993, when Mael Rhyneg O'Keary, King of Carbery, was killed by the Teffa, this killing went on and on. The tribes were continually seeking a way to gain territory. Even in 1128 we finally read of the slaying of Ciardha, another king of Carbery. It's important again to stress that confirmation about name, place and time is impossible to confirm. Not only does the language change, but the spelling within that language. Family groups within a tribe split into clans and clans into septs. Kings described as lords and lords as kings. However, that shouldn't present a problem. It is not a question of trying to change history or give credence, but present a picture where the Kilkeary fit into early Christian Munster.